So hello, Nicola. Really good to speak to you again, because when we first spoke, it was just as lockdown was starting and you were really concerned about the whole of the hospitality sector. It's a sector you've worked in for 30 years. And then 3 years ago, you and your family started a new pub, a new hotel, the Rose and Crown in Knutsford. You'd ploughed lots of money in, and this year was going to be your year to have some return, some profit back after all your hard work. So pubs, restaurants opened the 4th of July. How was it for you?
Okay, so there was a lot of pre-work to do in the 2 weeks running up. There was a big 43-page document from the government that we took really seriously and looked at all the risk assessments and everything. So it was quite nervy on the way up because it was completely uncharted territory, and a lot of things that were very innate for the pub business were taken away and that kind of thing. But what we wanted to do is make sure that we created a safe but welcoming environment. So we wanted to manage the situation for our customers so they felt they'd walk into the business, we would walk them through how that looked from a safety point of view, so they wouldn't have to think about what they had to do. We would manage it. So we all obviously had the staff in, we did our training, we went full table service, waitress service, nobody at the bar. We did lots of, we looked at the whole mask thing, and the government actually said that unless it was very, very vigilant, it didn't necessarily bring any gains as long as you were mitigating it with lots of other very good procedures. So we were all very nervous and good to go. And then it was actually a really lovely day in respects that we had so many local people who came back to see us. And I think the hardest thing for me was not hugging and kissing everybody when they came through the door.
Oh.
And I think they felt very comfortable. I think they were quite pleased that it wasn't overtly sort of black and yellow everywhere and that kind of thing, because we'd taken some advice. Actually, it was in the document to say if it's a pub, we put all our messaging on blackboards. So even though it was saying stay, socially distanced, wash your hands, do this, all our signage seemed to fit in with the pub environment as opposed to be so glaring. And the staff were amazing. And so
at the end of the night, when you might have all, or you and your husband might have had a drink together, a stiff drink at the end of the night, did you say that went according to plan? It was better than I thought. We had as many customers as we thought. Was it disappointing? Were you pleased? What were your thoughts?
We did sit down at the end of the shift with a large glass of wine, the principles of the business, and we had a quick debrief about what went well and didn't go well. One of the things that we were very passionate about was the fact that when it got to about sort of like 9:30, 9:30, we had people who could come to the pub for a drink. If they had a table, obviously they could have a table to have drinks or dinner. But by that stage, if you had people coming from outside who hadn't been with you all evening, they were in a situation where they'd maybe had a few drinks, to celebrate it being Super Saturday. So we felt it was important that we brought everything closing a little earlier, because we couldn't manage their ability to social distance.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that we learned, is that we'd rather look after customers when they're in a situation where they are compliant and happy to have just a nice and warm environment. But as it got later in the evening, we got a little bit nervous and thought, actually, this is where we need to just say, okay, guys, it's been very nice, but now is the time to go home and after a nice evening. And what else did we find? People were very, very positive about how we managed it, and the staff, the tray service went very, very well. It did mean, though, we didn't. That's the one thing that we'll have to balance as we go forward, is it's actually more labour intensive for less customers. And so because we've got a very small bar as well, we could only have 1 or 2 people maximum behind the bar. So actually expediting the drinks was quite a challenge. So we're going to have to work with that in the future going forward. It wasn't a gloriously sunny day, but because we've got a large terrace, when it is gloriously sunny next weekend, we've realised we're going to have a lot of staff to deliver that level of service. I think that's just the important thing, is noting where the pinch points are as well in terms of the building. There was a couple, when we got people in there and we thought, oh, actually, that's not a good area where we put that's the one-way system. Let's change it, let's adapt to it and make it sort of happen. So yeah, and all good.
Do you think it's going to be more about food now and less about the drinks? I mean, have you noticed a change in what you're serving? Or did it feel like a pub environment and people socializing and having a good time?
Yeah, no, I mean, we have a 50-50 split, food to wet, and that continued to be the same kind of ratio. So I think this weekend it might be slightly different going forward. We had a lot of people who came and wanted to be with us and have dinner and that kind with us this weekend specifically. So going forward, I would imagine that split to be the same. People definitely wanted to stay in the pub quite, they wanted to be in there like 2 to 3 hours. So they were having a couple of drinks before and then having the dinner, that kind of thing. Whether that'll change next weekend, I'm not too sure. But yeah.
So it's a longer sort of evening. So people are really making an evening of it rather than maybe nipping in, getting a drink and leaving to the next venue. They may be maybe only choosing one venue for a night, whereas in bygone sort of times, you might have done multiple venues for the night.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Knutsford by nature is that kind of place that you can easily pop into 2 or 3 different bars, before you go for dinner and that kind of thing. But I think people are definitely sort of saying, well, I've got my table, I feel comfortable, this is an environment I like, and so I'm actually going to, continue to stay here. And I think in some ways that works quite well, because if people are going to multiple venues, sometimes by the time they get to the last multiple venue, like you say, that I don't think they're made and being as responsible as they were at the start of the evening.
They're jollier. The alcohol has taken its toll.
Yeah.
So when we last spoke, and we were going into the lockdown, and you were reshaping the business, wondering what you were going to do, how would it alter, doing takeaways, but all of these things you're doing. How do you feel now, 3 months later, sort of the journey you've been on and opening back up again? How are you feeling?
Okay, so I feel very positive in terms of the customers want to come back. And I think if we create an environment that feels safe, they will come back. I think they also want us to take it very seriously, even though they want a really nice, welcoming environment. For me, we obviously think of it longer term, so we know we can adapt quite quickly because we're an independent business, that we can, move it the way we need to. I think Christmas now, looking at the long term, is really how this is going to look, because Christmas would normally be our bumper time. And I think that's where the industry is looking now at the moment, is that once we get the hotel up and running and everything up and running, I imagine we'll be continuing with this new world within the hospitality industry of distancing and not allowing so many numbers in your venue and that kind of thing for quite some time. So I think it's if Christmas is not as buoyant as it normally is, and then we get into the new year, which we then go into a January and February lull, which is natural, normally in this business, but December's usually got you through that, so can see you through the lean time. I think that's my biggest concern, is how long we can continue at this sort of, because there's no disputing, the revenue is not where it is before, but some of the expenses are actually the same, if not a tad more in some respects. But we're trying really, really hard to cost control everything.
So at the time when they said it would be 2 meters, you could only maybe have had 30% in the pub. When it went to 1 meter plus, you could be at 70%. So I'm taking it, I might be wrong, but I'm taking it then you're 70% of your incomings if you've only got 70% of people there. So is that what you're saying? If it remains like this at 70% of our take, you are going to weigh up what you do or how you change things going forward?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we did a couple of scenarios before we were coming out of it, in terms of looking at if we were at 30%, 50% and 80%. And I think at the moment we look like it's sort of like that 50-60% that we're going to be at quite some time. I'd like to think we can get back to 80, but in this business, as we saw before we went into lockdown, we'd got to where we needed to be. And so it was going to be our big year, but now it's sort of set us back in terms of that we were, we had the right levels of staff for 100% of our business. We had the right level of, suppliers and that kind of thing. So it just means that we're going to have to make possibly still some difficult decisions in the time ahead. Yeah. But I'm an eternal optimist, so you know.
Yeah, so it is adapting, and maybe what people want coming forward might change, and maybe there are other positives coming out of that. I mean, at the time we were talking about, as you were doing takeaway food and different things,
Yeah.
what are the extra income streams that you might need to supplement your business?
Yeah.
Will you be having to do, say, fish and chip takeaways forever, and that could fill that gap, that revenue gap? Do you think that will be something that you do continue?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've noticed is that on Sundays, we didn't use, well, we did obviously never did takeaways, but on Sundays we have quite a busy restaurant. But when you bring a brigade in, when they've been in since sort of 8 o'clock, you can get them till about sort of like 5, 6 o'clock. And then we used to finish our food option then. But now we've actually said we're going to do takeaways for that little extra hour, where we can actually bring in quite a few covers, but with having to bring a whole new brigade in, fresh, extra hours and that kind of thing. So there's loads of ways we can tweak things. I also think as well, it's important that, and I think they do appreciate this, the customer realizes that we're not going to be like we used to be. We open at this time, we close at this time, we do food at this time. We need to be able to adapt very much in the next few weeks to find out what is the optimum way for us to trade our business. But indications are that people are going to forgive us that in the early stages, like a reduced menu, you know, and we're just sort of saying to bear with us while we find our feet and find the most optimum way to run our business for them, to make sure we can carry it on for the future. You know, it's going to be there for many, many, many years to come.
But you do have a supportive community. You've got a good name in the local area. People like what you do. So I'm hoping that it is all positive for you. Because like I said, you know, it's a big family, you know, business that you've sort of put together, and you're wanting it to succeed for you, the local community, and your family.
Yeah, I've said to all the regulars when they came at the weekend, they said, "Oh, Nicola, we've saved a fortune." I said, "Well, I need it spent in the pub now."
Yes, you don't get any change. We're expecting big tips, so we expect to see you in tomorrow as well.
Oh, and that's another thing I'm going to put a shout out to the whole world there is these poor staff have had no tips for God knows how long. So if you get good service, be generous.
Oh, yeah. And I'm just thinking so many people will be so delighted to be out of their home, not having to cook, that really they should get giddy on all that excitement and have an extra drink and support all the staff.
But when they came in the door, it was lit on Saturday. Some people were going, it was as if it was nervous. It's like, oh my God. I said, yes, it's okay. You can come in. And this is a pub. It's a great place, isn't it? They were like, oh my God. I mean,
well, there will be that. There will be that. I mean, some people haven't gone out, didn't know what to expect. Some places had full perspex screens. Other places, people were wearing sort of visors. And then I guess people were thinking, am I going to enjoy the pub as much as I did if there are all of these sort of hygiene and protections and where I'm sat and what I'm doing? I guess it was like going on a first date. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, a bit like, and it felt like you were welcoming everyone to your party in your house. It was like that nervous, oh my God, is everyone going to enjoy it? Is everything going to be okay? And I think the overwhelming feedback from people was that they felt, hopefully we'd pitched it just right, in that it felt welcoming, but they could still see that we were managing the situation behind the scenes, you know, so yeah.
And the other thing I guess I wanted to know, because you've got to sort of be socially distant, you know, are the toilets pinch points? Do people sort of wait, stand aside, let somebody go first? How are you organising sort of loo visits?
Yeah, well, we've done a maximum of 2 people because we've actually got quite large ladies' toilets and gents for the size of people that we have going through. So we're not sort of like a big chain that has, you know, hundreds of people waiting to go to the toilets. And we've been in checking them every half an hour and that kind of thing. But do you know what I've noticed with people in the pub is everybody's very respectful. You know, everybody's sort of, even if they don't, even if some people don't sort of not necessarily believe in the whole thing, but they don't adhere to the whole thing. When they're in a public environment, they still take it very seriously. They stand back, they take some time, you know, everybody's sort of, so everybody's been quite respectful in that. There's just 2 people in there, and they've got wipes in there, and they've got lots of cleaning things if they feel they want to clean things before, you know.
I mean, I see that everywhere. This sort of, whether it's sort of ultra chivalrous or whether it's ultra polite, that nobody wants to get into each other's space. So that's happening, whether it's in the pub or in the supermarket. You see that all the time. But I guess that's a positive. But look, I think that's, you know, fantastic news. People need to get down there and support you. And I know so many people were excited with Super Saturday. They just need to be excited for Super Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
exactly.
and Saturday and Sunday. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nicola.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Esther.